Hey YouTube, welcome back to Reese's Wellness Journey. I hope you all had a good week. Today is Tuesday, and today we're going to talk about from the old table to the new table, and the three hard lessons that I learned or that my divorce taught me. Um, so we're going to get into the story. I never thought I'd be telling this story from my new dining room table, but here we are because divorce has a way of changing everything. And who would have thought that it'd change where you sit, where you eat, and where you would think at your table? So, my divorce changed my dining room table and it taught me some hard lessons. Um, the old table is where I received the news that my marriage was over. It was a, came in the form of a simple text, a few words, but a harsh reality. Um, that day, I knew my life would never be the same. And today, I'm sitting at a new table, and it is a table of healing, a table of purpose. And I want to share the three hard lessons that I've learned since that day. So the first lesson was or is that some tables have endings or they represent endings. And that's what the old table was. It was the end of that season of my life. Um, Never saw it coming, but here it is, and it's okay. Sometimes the places where you receive pain, you can no longer sit there. So I received the message, and maybe that happened on a Thursday. Come Friday, you're walking around the house angry, mad, sad. You got all these emotions, and I see the table, and it just floods back to Thursday. Come Saturday, it's the same thing all over again. So I call my brother and I tell him, come get the table. So Sunday, he comes and gets the dining room table and removes it from the home. And so, yeah, some places where you receive the pain, you can no longer sit. And I didn't want to sit at that table. Everybody always screaming, they want a seat at the table, but you don't want one at this one or at that old one. So I got rid of it. The old table wasn't just wood and nails, it became a symbol of heartache. And I realized that if I kept the table, I would have stayed stuck. And so I had to have it removed, and that's what I did. So I chose a new table, a new space that didn't carry the weight of the pain from the old one. So at this table right here, it became the symbol of a new beginning, a fresh start. And that's why I chose the color green. That's why you see the plants on the table. Plants represent growth. Green represents growth. And right now, I'm in a season of growing and walking into my purpose. So I'm very intentional about what I'm doing, what I'm saying, where I'm going, who I'm connecting with, um, and who gets to sit at the table. I'm very intentional about it. Um, and the symbol of the fresh beginning, it reminds me that the endings are real, but so are new starts. And I'm loving my new starts. Lesson two, loneliness doesn't have to break you. So after the divorce, there was no sitting at the old table, just staring in the dining room, looking at empty chairs. And the room was empty. The wine rack was still here. The china cabinet was still there. Um, but the silence was loud. And at night, it just seemed longer. And I remember thinking, like, this is not how my life is supposed to be. But here we are. And evidently, I was meant to go through that and come out on the other side. So this is my testimony that I'm sharing, because just because you go through pain don't mean you have to sit in it. And I chose not to sit in it. But The chairs were still here. And at the time, yeah, they were just screaming what I had lost. Like, you ain't a wife no more. You don't have a husband. There's nothing, or there's no one in the house. So you just start to feel loneliness. And um, I just wrestled with that for a couple of weeks. But eventually we got over it. Like, divorce forces you into loneliness, and then at first it feel like punishment, and then it feels like the world is just like, oh, that's what you get, you know. And because for a long time I blamed myself, like, what was it that I did? But I hadn't done anything. So, but when you're just sitting there in your thoughts, Satan just creep in and just say anything to you. But you have to be discerning to recognize God's voice for him to say that it is okay to be alone sometimes. And loneliness, it could, like I said, it could break you, or it could break you if you let it, or if you embrace it, it can reshape you. And I chose to let it reshape me, and I love the mode that God has put me in. I'm loving my purpose. I'm loving walking in my purpose. And at this new table, I started to see loneliness differently. I filled the silence with music. I started journaling. I continued to journal because I was already journaling. I was already saying affirmations. I was already praying, but I did it now at the new table. And I would eat by candlelight and not with no one else. I would do it by myself because I was worth sitting with. Um, and once you start to love on yourself, things become easier. Once you learn to laugh with yourself, things become easier. And then it doesn't seem like punishment once you love yourself and you know that you're worthy to be sitting with. So I didn't feel like it was a punishment anymore. It turned into power. Like, I can do this. It's okay to be by myself. I like being by myself. I like who I am when I'm by myself. Don't get me wrong, we love company too, but I'm okay with being by myself. I learned to love my own company, and that was the foundation of me becoming her. And we like who we are becoming. Lesson 3, you choose who you sit with. And at the old table, I didn't realize how much I gave access to people who didn't value me. I tolerated too much, and I kept silent for too long, and I gave seat to people who didn't deserve to be fed by my life or fed from my life. And so divorce taught me a hard but necessary truth that not everyone should sit with you. And we get to choose who sits at our table. And after the divorce, I realized that peace, respect, and God had permanent seats at the table. This past weekend, I had my friends here for a thank you party, and they were chosen, and they know why they were chosen, and I let them all know what they represented, and they knew how they got to the table, because everybody can't sit at the table, but they know why they got to sit at the table. And it was very intentional. And we talked about the boundaries, the growth, the respect, love, everything. We talked about God. Like, so it is very intentional of who you have at your table. So peace, respect, and God have permanent seats at my table. Anyone could come into the space. Anyone who comes into my space has to match the energy. And I'm big on that in my house. Like, we don't do messy, we don't do chaos, we don't do drama. No, none of that. Ain't no loud yelling, ain't no loud talking, because we're not going to disrupt the peace. My plants are my peace, And negative energy have negative effects on plants. And what you ain't gonna do is come in here with your negativity over here. Nope, not over here. So access to me ain't free no more. So if you ain't coming with intentions, good intentions, then you can stay on the other side of the door, and that is fine with me. This new table represents boundaries. It reminds me that love shouldn't cost me my peace. And now that we're intentional about who sits here and who I let get close to me and who I share my life with, it's very intentional. And one of the greatest lessons that divorce has given me is that the power of choosing wisely. I'm very intentional of who I let be around me. So like I said before, access to me is not for free anymore. I'm choosing wisely. Um, the old table brought bad news, and I was sitting here thinking like God, he has a funny sense of humor, because I'm looking like, oh, OT, Old Testament, my old testimony, the bad news. Yeah, that's the old table. The new table is my new beginnings, my new journey, me walking into my purpose, me rebuilding, me learning, me evolving, me being happy. So don't be afraid to leave the old table behind, because you can build greater and better things at the new table. So those are the 3 lessons that I learned from my divorce. Was that some tables represent endings. Loneliness doesn't have to break you, and you choose who sit at the table with you. So catch me next week on another talk on divorce and how it can be. And just because you experience some pain don't mean you're not going to have any good days ahead of you afterwards, because it can get better if you want it to. So it's all about your perspective on how you want to be, how you want to live. So I thank you for listening. And if you like my video, please comment. Let me know of your bad table experience and what your new table looks like. And if you like it, please comment, like, and subscribe. Tell your friends, share the videos.